The air in the classroom was thick with tension as Megan Taylor sat in the front row, her hand raised confidently despite the anxious flutter in her stomach. She knew the answer to the question Miss Vincent had posed, her mind brimming with thoughts ready to spill forth. But as the seconds ticked by, Miss Vincent's gaze seemed to deliberately pass over her, instead settling on a student across the room. Megan's heart sank, a familiar frustration knotting in her chest. This wasn't an accidental oversight, it was a pointed dismissal. Around her, the murmurs of her classmates filled the silence, their eyes darting between Megan and the teacher, each echoing the silent question in her mind: would anyone stand up against this quiet injustice? Megan's resolve hardened in that moment, her determination as palpable as the disappointment she felt. She knew she couldn't let this continue, not for herself nor for others. Megan Taylor sat at her usual desk near the front of the classroom, her eyes fixed on the worn pages of her English textbook. The room was filled with the soft hum of whispers and the occasional clatter of pencils against desks, a typical day at Springfield High. To anyone passing by, it might seem like an ordinary English class, but Megan knew better. The atmosphere was charged with a tension that had become all too familiar, a subtle undercurrent that shifted with the presence of Miss Vincent, the English teacher. Megan was a bright and ambitious student, known for her insightful contributions and her passion for literature. Her friends often marveled at her ability to articulate her thoughts with clarity and depth, and her essays were celebrated for their perceptive analysis. Yet, despite her evident talent, Megan faced a unique set of challenges. Her father, Mr. Taylor, was the principal of Springfield High, a fact that both empowered and complicated her standing among her peers. While she appreciated the support her family provided, Megan was determined to prove her worth on her own terms. As the class settled into their seats, Miss Vincent entered the room with her usual brisk stride, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was a tall woman with sharp features and an air of authority that rarely welcomed dissent. Her reputation as a strict, no-nonsense teacher preceded her, but for Megan there was something more insidious at play. Miss Vincent's dismissive attitude and patronizing comments had become a constant shadow over Megan's academic journey, a reminder that prejudice still found ways to manifest, even in the most progressive of environments. The bell rang, signaling the start of the period, and Miss Vincent began her lecture, her voice a measured cadence that filled the room. Megan listened intently, her mind racing with thoughts and ideas, eager to contribute to the discussion. She knew that staying silent wasn't an option, not when she had so much to offer. Her hand shot up, ready to engage in the dialogue, but Miss Vincent's gaze seemed to slide past her, settling instead on another student. It was a pattern Megan had noticed many times before, a deliberate choice that left her feeling invisible. Despite the silent dismissal, Megan refused to let her resolve waver. She was determined to participate, to make her voice heard, even if it meant navigating the subtle biases that pervaded the classroom. Her friends noticed the injustice as well, their eyes meeting hers in a silent exchange of support. It was these small acts of solidarity that bolstered Megan, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this struggle. As the class progressed, Miss Vincent announced the details of an upcoming essay assignment, her tone leaving little room for interpretation. The topic was one Megan had been looking forward to, a chance to delve into the complexities of a novel she cherished. She poured hours into her research, crafting an argument that she knew was both original and compelling. Yet, when the day came to present her findings, Miss Vincent's response was a cold dismissal. "This is unoriginal, Megan," the teacher declared in front of the class, her words sharp and cutting. "I expected more from you." The public humiliation was a sting that cut deep, and Megan felt the weight of her classmates' eyes upon her. Her cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger, her mind racing with questions she couldn't voice. What more had she expected? Why was her work deemed unworthy when she had poured so much of herself into it? That evening, Megan sat at the kitchen table, her untouched dinner growing cold as she pondered her next steps. She knew she couldn't ignore the situation, but the prospect of confronting it was daunting. Her father, Mr. Taylor, entered the room, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. You seem lost in thought, Megan, he observed, taking a seat across from her. What's on your mind? Megan hesitated, unsure of how to phrase her dilemma without seeming like she was seeking his intervention. She wanted to navigate this on her own, to prove that she could handle the challenges before her without relying on his position as principal. Yet, the burden of silence was heavy, and she knew she needed guidance. It's Miss Vincent, she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think she values my work. It's like she doesn't see me. Her father listened intently, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. Have you spoken to her about it? He asked gently. Megan shook her head. I want to, but I don't know how. It feels like whatever I say won't matter. Mr. Taylor sighed, his expression softening. Megan, you have every right to stand up for yourself. It's important that you feel respected and valued in the classroom. If you want, I can help you figure out how to approach this. Megan nodded, grateful for his support, yet still determined to find a way that didn't rely solely on his influence. Together, they discussed strategies, planning how Megan could address the issue with Miss Vincent directly. They talked late into the night, the conversation weaving between personal anecdotes and practical advice, a reminder of the bond they shared. As the days passed, Megan found herself buoyed by the support of her friends and family. They rallied around her, offering encouragement and helping her gather evidence of Miss Vincent's bias. They noted similar patterns with other students of color, documenting incidents that underscored the systemic issues within the school. Megan's quiet resilience became a beacon for others, a source of strength that inspired her peers to join her in the fight for justice. In the midst of these challenges, Megan continued to excel in her studies, her determination shining through in every assignment. She knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was prepared to face it head-on. A crucial school board meeting loomed on the horizon, where the issue of diversity and inclusion was set to take center stage. Megan and her friends worked tirelessly to prepare a presentation that would expose the biases within Springfield High, drawing on personal testimonies and documented evidence. The preparation for the meeting became a project that united Megan and her friends, their shared goal fostering a sense of camaraderie and purpose. Late nights were spent poring over notes and strategizing their presentation, a testament to their collective resolve. Megan found herself stepping into a leadership role, her voice growing stronger with each passing day. As the date of the school board meeting approached, Megan felt a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. She knew that this was an opportunity to create real change, to stand up not just for herself, but for all those who had been quietly marginalized. Her father, aware of the importance of the moment, encouraged her to share her story, assuring her that she had the power to make a difference. With each passing day, Springfield High felt like a school on the brink of transformation. Conversations about diversity and inclusion began to surface, students and teachers alike engaging in dialogues that challenged the status quo. Megan could feel the shift in the air, a growing momentum that promised a brighter future. In her heart, Megan knew that this journey was about more than just confronting one teacher's bias. It was about forging a path for others to follow, about inspiring her peers to stand against injustice and celebrate their unique voices. As she walked the halls of Springfield High, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and resilience. The classroom buzzed with anticipation as Miss Vincent distributed the graded essays, her expression inscrutable. Megan Taylor sat at her desk, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had poured her soul into this essay, crafting a nuanced argument that she hoped would resonate. As the paper landed on her desk, Megan's eyes widened in disbelief at the large red mark scrawled across the top. Unoriginal. Her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Megan looked up to find Miss Vincent already addressing the class. Some of you, she began, her gaze lingering pointedly on Megan, need to dig deeper into your analysis. Original thought is key in literature. Megan's heart sank as a few classmates stole glances her way, their expressions a mix of sympathy and confusion. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the sting of public humiliation sharper than she'd anticipated. Her mind raced, replaying the hours she'd spent researching and refining her argument. This wasn't just a critique, it felt like a dismissal of her identity and effort. After class, her friends gathered around her, their voices a quiet chorus of support. "Megan, your essay was brilliant," Jasmine said, her voice firm with conviction. "Miss Vincent's feedback was totally off." Megan nodded, appreciating their solidarity, but feeling a knot of frustration tighten in her chest. "I just can't understand why she won't see value in my work," she admitted, her voice tinged with resignation. That evening, at home, Megan sat at the kitchen table, the essay spread in front of her like a challenge she couldn't quite conquer. Her father, Mr. Taylor, entered the room, his principal's demeanor softened by paternal concern. "Tough day?" he asked gently, sitting down across from her. Megan hesitated, her fingers tracing the red marks on her essay. "It's Miss Vincent," she finally admitted. "She called my work unoriginal in front of everyone. It feels like she has something against me." Mr. Taylor's expression shifted from concern to a thoughtful frown. "You know, Megan," he began carefully, "sometimes people let their biases cloud their judgment. It's important to stand up for yourself, but I understand if you want to handle this on your own." Megan's eyes met her father's, searching for guidance. "I just don't want it to seem like I'm using your position to fight my battles," she confessed. "I believe in your ability to address this," he assured her. "But remember, you're not alone. Sometimes, speaking out is the first step to change." As Megan pondered her father's words, a spark of determination ignited within her. This was more than an academic setback. It was a call to action. She resolved to confront the issue, not just for herself, but for others who might be facing similar biases. Megan sat at her desk in the quiet sanctuary of her room, the walls lined with books that had always been her refuge. The evening light filtered softly through the window, casting a warm glow over her notes and textbooks. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, frustration, and a simmering determination she couldn't quite articulate yet. She replayed the day's events in her mind, Miss Vincent's dismissive smirk as she undermined Megan's hard work in front of the class. The humiliation had stung, but it was the injustice that gnawed at her more fiercely. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Jasmine. "We're with you, Meg. Let's meet at my place tomorrow after school. We need to talk about this." Megan's heart lifted slightly. Jasmine and her other friends, Alex and Priya, had been her unwavering support at Springfield High, and she knew they wouldn't let this slide. With a renewed sense of purpose, she replied, "Absolutely. See you then." The next day, Megan navigated her classes with a quiet resolve. She noticed the sympathetic glances from some classmates, the whispered conversations that halted as she approached. Yet, there was also an undercurrent of solidarity, a silent acknowledgement that what had happened was wrong and needed to be addressed. After school, Megan made her way to Jasmine's house, a cozy bungalow nestled in a tree-lined street. The familiar creak of the porch swing greeted her as she stepped onto the porch. Jasmine opened the door, her warm smile a balm to Megan's frazzled nerves. "Hey, come in," Jasmine said, ushering Megan inside. Alex and Priya were already there, seated around the kitchen table, their faces serious but welcoming. Megan took a deep breath and joined them, grateful for their unwavering friendship. "Thanks for this, guys. I really appreciate it." Priya, ever the practical one, got straight to the point. "We need to gather evidence. It's not just about what happened to you, Megan. Miss Vincent has been doing this to other students too, right?" Megan nodded, her resolve hardening. "Yeah, I've noticed it with others, especially students of color. It's like she just dismisses us without even considering our work." Alex leaned forward, his expression earnest. "We need to document everything. If we can show a pattern, it'll be harder for the school to ignore." They spent the next few hours strategizing, their conversation punctuated by bursts of intensity and moments of quiet reflection. They decided to start by talking to other students who might have had similar experiences, gathering testimonies and any tangible evidence they could find. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in twilight, Megan felt a sense of determination solidify within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about challenging a system that allowed such prejudice to persist. Over the following weeks, Megan and her friends worked tirelessly, their mission fueled by a shared sense of justice. They spoke to students discreetly, listening to their stories and taking meticulous notes. Each testimony they gathered was a piece of a larger puzzle, revealing a disturbing pattern of bias that couldn't be ignored. Jasmine, with her natural empathy and understanding, was instrumental in encouraging students to share their experiences. Her gentle demeanor put them at ease, and soon they had a growing compilation of accounts from students who had been dismissed or belittled by Miss Vincent. Megan also found herself excelling in her studies despite the challenges. Her work became an act of defiance, each essay and project a testament to her capabilities and resilience. Her friends noticed her quiet strength, and it inspired them to push forward, even when the task seemed daunting. As their evidence grew, so did their confidence. They were ready to take their findings to the school board meeting, a pivotal event that promised to address issues of diversity and inclusion at Springfield High. The meeting loomed large on the horizon, and with it, the weight of their responsibility. Megan felt it acutely, the pressure to represent not just herself, but all the students who had faced discrimination. Yet, in the camaraderie of her friends and the support of her family, she found the courage to press on. One evening, as Megan sat with her father in their living room, she shared her concerns and hopes. Mr. Taylor listened intently, his expression thoughtful and supportive. "Megan," he said, his voice steady and reassuring, "I know this is difficult, but remember, you're not alone in this. Your voice matters, and what you're doing is important." His words resonated deeply with her, reinforcing the belief that change was possible. It wasn't just about confronting Miss Vincent. It was about transforming Springfield High into a place where all students could thrive without fear of bias or prejudice. As the day of the school board meeting approached, Megan and her friends refined their presentation, focusing on clarity and impact. They practiced their speeches, honing their arguments, and ensuring every point was supported by evidence. The anticipation built, a mix of anxiety and determination fueling their preparations. Megan felt the weight of her peers' expectations, but also their unwavering belief in her ability to make a difference. Finally, the day arrived. Megan stood with Jasmine, Alex, and Priya outside the auditorium, their nerves palpable, but their resolve unshaken. As they prepared to enter, Megan took a moment to steady herself, drawing strength from the solidarity of her friends. "We've got this," Jasmine whispered, her eyes full of encouragement. Megan nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yeah, we do." With that, they stepped through the doors, ready to confront the injustice that had plagued Springfield High and to spark the change they all knew was desperately needed. Each step they took was a step toward a more inclusive and equitable future, not just for themselves, but for all the students who would come after them. The revelation unfolded one quiet evening at the Taylor household, the kind of evening where the air seemed thick with the anticipation of change. Megan sat at the dining room table, surrounded by a chaos of papers and notebooks, her laptop humming softly. Her father, Mr. Taylor, entered the room, carrying a small stack of envelopes. His expression was serious yet gentle, a look Megan had come to recognize as one reserved for moments of importance. "Megan, I think you should see these," he said, placing the letters in front of her. The envelopes were plain and unassuming, their contents, however, were anything but. Megan picked up the first letter, her curiosity piqued. As she read, her eyes widened in disbelief. It was a detailed account from another student, describing a similar experience with Miss Vincent. The dismissive comments, the refusal to acknowledge raised hands, the subtle yet undeniable bias in grading, it was all there, a mirror of her own struggles. "These are from other students?" Megan asked, her voice tinged with a mix of relief and anger. Mr. Taylor nodded. "They were left anonymously in my office. I didn't realize how many students have been affected. It's clear this isn't just about you, it's a larger issue." Megan read through the letters, each one a testament to the quiet suffering endured by her peers. As the words sank in, a sense of solidarity began to replace her isolation. She wasn't alone, and this was not just her fight. "It's worse than I thought," she murmured, her resolve hardening with each letter she finished. "We need to do something. We have to bring this to the board." Her father smiled, a proud glimmer in his eyes. "I know you can do it, Megan. You have the strength and the support to make a real change here. We'll stand by you every step of the way." The thought of speaking at the school board meeting was daunting, but the letters were a catalyst. They were proof that this was a battle worth fighting. Taking a deep breath, Megan looked at her father, seeing not just her dad, but an ally and a mentor. "Will you help me prepare?" she asked, determination lacing her words. "Of course," Mr. Taylor replied, pulling a chair next to hers. "Together, we'll make sure your voice is heard." In the days leading up to the meeting, Megan worked tirelessly, her friends by her side. They compiled the letters into a cohesive narrative, interweaving personal stories with factual evidence. Each letter was a voice, and Megan was determined to amplify them. After school, the group gathered at Megan's house, the dining room transformed into a war room of sorts, filled with poster boards and laptops. Jasmine, one of Megan's closest friends, was particularly helpful, her quiet determination complementing Megan's fiery resolve. "Jasmine, can you help me with the visuals?" Megan asked, gesturing to the laptop. "I want to make sure the board can't ignore what we're showing them." "Absolutely," Jasmine replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "We'll make it impossible to look away." As the day of the meeting approached, Megan felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The night before, she practiced her speech in front of her father, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "You're ready," Mr. Taylor said, his confidence in her unwavering. "Remember, this isn't just about speaking out. It's about making sure everyone is seen and heard." Megan nodded, the weight of the responsibility heavy, but the knowledge that she was part of something bigger than herself was empowering. The revelation had come, not just in the form of the letters, but in the realization that Megan had the power to stand not just for herself, but for all those who had been silenced. She was ready to step into the light, to cast aside the shadow of injustice, and illuminate a path toward change. On the day of the board meeting, the air was electric with anticipation. The Springfield High auditorium, usually reserved for school plays and assemblies, was filled to capacity. Students, teachers, parents, and community members packed the seats, their eyes trained on the small podium at the front of the room. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of tension and hope, a collective breath held in expectation of what was to come. Megan Taylor stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the low hum of conversation, punctuated by the occasional creak of folding chairs and the rustle of papers. Her friends gathered around her, a circle of support and solidarity. Jasmine, her closest confidant, squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You've got this, Megan," Jasmine said, her voice steady and calm. "We've all got your back." Megan nodded, drawing strength from her friend's words. She glanced at her father, Mr. Taylor, who stood nearby, his expression a mix of pride and concern. He gave her a small nod, a silent reminder of the support waiting in the wings. The meeting began with the usual procedural formalities, but the anticipation in the room was palpable. As the agenda progressed, Megan's turn to speak drew closer. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the countless hours she and her friends had spent preparing for this moment. Their presentation was a tapestry of personal stories, documented incidents, and a call for change, a narrative woven with the threads of courage and resilience. Finally, the board chair announced her name. "And now we will hear from Megan Taylor, a student who has demonstrated remarkable leadership and courage. Megan, the floor is yours." With one last look at her friends and father, Megan stepped onto the stage. The auditorium seemed to stretch infinitely before her, faces blurring into a sea of expectant eyes. She adjusted the microphone, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice, when it emerged, was strong and clear. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her gaze sweeping across the audience. "My name is Megan Taylor, and I'm here to share a story not just about me, but about many students who have faced prejudice and bias within our school." The room was silent, a charged stillness that amplified every word. Megan recounted her personal experiences with Miss Vincent, speaking of the subtle dismissals and overt criticisms that had marked her time in the English classroom. Her voice wavered slightly as she described the sting of having her work dismissed, but she pressed on, buoyed by the presence of her friends and the belief in the justice of her cause. As students, we've documented the patterns of bias and prejudice, Megan continued, gesturing to a screen where slides now displayed testimonies and evidence. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect a systemic issue that affects many of us, and it needs to be addressed. As she spoke, Megan couldn't help but notice the reactions around the room. Some faces were etched with shock, others nodded in recognition, and a few bore expressions of shame and discomfort. The weight of her words seemed to settle over the audience, grounding them in the reality of the students' experiences. Megan paused, taking a moment to steady herself before delivering the final part of her presentation. I stand here today not just to share these stories, but to ask for change. We need a school that celebrates diversity, a place where every student feels valued and respected. This is our school, and we have the power to make it better. Her closing words hung in the air, a rallying cry that resonated with the collective consciousness of the room. For a moment, there was silence, a silence that felt like the world holding its breath, waiting for a spark to ignite action. Then, as if a dam had burst, the auditorium erupted into applause. The sound was a wave, crashing over Megan and enveloping her in its embrace. She felt the tears prick at her eyes, a mix of relief and triumph washing over her. Her friends were on their feet, cheering loudly, their faces alight with pride and solidarity. The school board members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of resolve and responsibility. The chairperson leaned forward, speaking into the microphone. Thank you, Megan, for your courage and leadership. Your presentation has opened our eyes to issues that must be addressed immediately. We are committed to taking action to ensure that Springfield High becomes a more inclusive and equitable environment for all students. Megan stepped back from the podium, her heart soaring. As she made her way off the stage, her father met her with open arms. I'm so proud of you, Megan, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You did it. Her friends surrounded her, their excitement and relief a tangible force. You were amazing, Megan, Jasmine exclaimed. We knew you could do it. As the meeting continued, the board members deliberated on the next steps, with a clear mandate to address the issues raised. The decision was swift and uncompromising. Miss Vincent would be dismissed from her position, and a comprehensive review of school policies and practices would be undertaken to foster a more inclusive environment. In the aftermath, Megan found herself at the center of a transformative wave that swept through Springfield High. New initiatives were launched, promoting inclusivity and respect. Workshops and discussions became a regular part of school life, encouraging students and staff alike to confront their biases and embrace diversity. Megan's role within the school community shifted. No longer just a student, she became an advocate and a leader, inspiring others to stand up and speak out. Her relationship with her father deepened, their bond strengthened by mutual respect and understanding. Together, they worked to ensure that the changes made were lasting and meaningful. Walking through the halls of Springfield High, Megan felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her courage had sparked a change, lighting a path for future generations to follow. As she moved forward, she knew that the fight for justice and equality was far from over, but she was ready to face it head-on, surrounded by a community that had learned to stand together and celebrate the rich tapestry of their diversity. In the weeks that followed the decisive board meeting, Springfield High buzzed with a renewed energy. The dismissal of Miss Vincent was not just the removal of a prejudiced teacher, it was a symbolic victory for the entire student body. Hallways once filled with hushed whispers now buzzed with spirited conversations about fairness and equality. It was as if the school had collectively taken a deep breath, exhaling the old oppressive air to make room for a new atmosphere of openness and respect. Megan Taylor, at the center of this transformation, felt the shift profoundly. Walking through the corridors, she noticed the subtle changes in her peers' interactions. Greetings became warmer, smiles more genuine. Teachers and students alike engaged more openly in conversations about diversity, race, and inclusion. It was the dawn of a cultural shift that had long been overdue. One afternoon, Megan found herself in the newly established Diversity and Inclusion Club. The room was vibrant with posters displaying messages of unity and empowerment, artwork celebrating different cultures, and a mural painted by the art students depicting a garden of diverse flowers blooming together. Megan stood at the front of the room, her eyes scanning the faces of her peers who filled the chairs in anticipation. "Thank you all for being here," Megan began, her voice steady and confident. "It means so much to see so many of you committed to making Springfield High a place where everyone feels valued and respected." Her words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement. Among the faces, she spotted her friends, those who had stood by her, gathered evidence, and fueled the movement that had brought about this change. Their presence was a reminder of the power of solidarity. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Megan continued, "but I'm excited about the possibilities. We've started something important, and it's up to us to keep it going." A hand shot up in the audience. It was Sarah, a fellow junior and one of Megan's close friends. "Megan, what's the first initiative we should tackle? There's so much we can do." Megan smiled, her mind racing with ideas. "I think we should start by organizing workshops for both students and teachers, a space where we can share experiences, learn from one another, and discuss strategies for fostering inclusivity." Another student, Jamal, leaned forward. "And maybe we could have cultural appreciation days. Each month, we highlight a different culture, food, music, art, and learn about it together." The room buzzed with excitement as more ideas flowed, each suggestion building on the last, creating a tapestry of possibilities. Megan felt a swell of pride, knowing that the seeds of change were taking root. Later, as the meeting dispersed, Megan lingered in the room, her heart full. She was joined by her father, Mr. Taylor, who had been a quiet presence throughout the meeting, observing with pride as his daughter took on a leadership role. "You did well today, Megan," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "I'm proud of you, not just for standing up, but for leading the way forward." Megan looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your support, Dad. Knowing you believed in me made all the difference." Mr. Taylor nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "You've shown everyone that change is possible, Megan. It's a lesson in courage and resilience that will stay with this school for years to come." As they walked through the halls together, Megan noticed the bulletin boards, now adorned with student art and flyers for upcoming cultural events. It was a testament to the transformation underway, a visual narrative of a community coming together to celebrate its diversity. In the days that followed, Megan's role as a leader in the school community continued to evolve. She was frequently invited to speak at various school events, sharing her journey and encouraging others to embrace their voices. Her story became a source of inspiration not just at Springfield High, but in the wider community, sparking conversations on inclusivity far beyond the school's walls. Her relationship with her father deepened, grounded in a newfound mutual respect. They often spent evenings discussing ideas for furthering the school's initiatives, brainstorming ways to involve parents and community leaders in their mission. It was a collaboration that strengthened their bond, each conversation a reminder of the power of shared purpose. As the school year progressed, Megan noticed the impact of the changes she and her peers had worked so hard to implement. Teachers, once hesitant, now actively engaged in training sessions on cultural competency. Students who had previously felt marginalized began to participate more confidently in class discussions, their voices no longer silenced by fear of prejudice. One day, as Megan walked to her next class, she overheard a conversation between two freshmen. They spoke of the Diversity and Inclusion Club, expressing interest in joining and contributing their own ideas. Megan smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment. Springfield High was becoming a place where every student could see themselves reflected in the culture and curriculum, where differences were celebrated rather than ignored. Megan knew the journey was far from over, but the progress made filled her with hope for the future. As she stood at her locker, gathering her books, Jasmine, a sophomore who had been particularly inspired by Megan's story, approached her. "Megan," Jasmine said, her eyes bright with admiration, "thank you for everything you've done. You've shown us all that it's possible to stand up and make a difference." Megan smiled warmly, touched by the sentiment. "Thank you, Jasmine. Remember, this is just the beginning. Together, we can create a school where everyone feels they belong." The bell rang, signaling the start of the next class. And as students moved through the hallways, Megan felt a sense of peace. The journey had been challenging, but the triumph of unity and justice made every step worthwhile. With a renewed sense of purpose, Megan Taylor embraced her role as a catalyst for change, ready to continue leading Springfield High towards a future where diversity was not just acknowledged but celebrated. Her courage had ignited a movement, one that would empower future generations to stand against injustice and build a world where everyone was respected and valued.